and welcome to Long Live the Queen, where we talk about the women who made history. And by we, I mean the royal we, because it's just me. Today we're going to talk about Margaret of Provence. Lady Margaret of Provence was born in the year of our Lord 1221. Her father, Ramon, was the Count of Provence. He had been the count since the death of his father when Ramon was just 11 years old. His life was at risk, without protection, but he managed to survive against all odds. When he was about 21, he married Margaret's mother, Beatrice of Savoy, also 21. Her father was the powerful Count of Savoy. Ramon had his father-in-law's protection now. The couple started their family right away, but had 2 stillborn sons at first. But their 3rd pregnancy resulted in the birth of Lady Margaret. The couple started their family with a surviving baby girl, but likely had hopes for another boy to follow. 2 years later, they added another baby, Lady Eleanor. 2 years after that, another baby, Lady Sancha. And 4 years after that, their caboose, Lady Beatrice. You may know what that means. No surviving boys makes your daughters heiresses and highly valued in the marriage market. In 1233, the Queen Mother of Louis IX sent one of her knights to Provence. She had heard that Lady Margaret was graceful and beautiful, and this knight was to choose between Margaret and her sisters and choose one of them to marry the king. Margaret was chosen as a good match for the king because of her religious devotion and courtly manner. And it didn't hurt that she was, at 12, the only one old enough to be married, and that as the oldest, it was thought that she may inherit the counties of both of her parents. Lady Margaret was escorted to Lyon by her parents for the marriage treaty to be signed. From there, she was escorted to her wedding by her uncles, William and Thomas of Savoy. On the 27th of May, 1234, at the age of 13, Margaret married 19-year-old King Louis IX of France, Saint Louis. You may remember him from his sister Saint Isabella's episode. The marriage was a struggle for a lot of reasons. Not only the inappropriate age gap, but also her new husband, the king, relied heavily on his mother Blanche, and she was a little controlling. Shortly after the wedding, the Queen Mother dismissed Margaret's uncles and all of her servants that she knew and had brought with her. Queen Margaret and Queen Mother Blanche resented each other from the very start. Though without the mama drama, the couple seemed to get along. There were reports of Margaret putting a cloak around her husband's shoulders on cold nights when he got up to pray. And there was one story that when Queen Margaret didn't think her husband dressed as his rank required, he said to her that he would dress as she wished if she would dress as he wished, and she did not take him up on that deal. Now that Lady Margaret was the Queen of France, it was her sister's turn to get married. Their uncle, William, having recently been dismissed from France by the Queen Mother, started communicating with the King of England about marrying Queen Margaret's younger sister, Eleanor. Eleanor, 13, was married to 28-year-old King Henry III of England on the 14th of January, 1236. Don't like that. So now 15-year-old Margaret was Queen of France, and her sister, 13-year-old Eleanor, was the Queen of England. France and England had not been on the friendliest of terms. This could have been seen as threatening, or maybe a shot for peace. Margaret and Eleanor were very close in childhood, and possibly the sisters could encourage their husbands to get along. Back in France, Queen Margaret was 19 and pregnant for the first time. In 1240, she gave birth to her first baby, Princess Blanche, presumably named after her grandmother, the Queen Mother, Blanche of Castile, who Margaret still did not get along well with. The following year, she had another baby, Princess Isabella, named presumably after her great-grandmother. The king and queen were only having girls, and they were naming them after previous queens of France. In 1243, Princess Blanche died at the age of just 3, likely from a childhood illness, but her 2-year-old sister Isabella survived. During this time, Margaret's sister Eleanor, the Queen of England, was trying to recruit more of her sisters to England. Eleanor's brother-in-law, Richard, had been recently widowed, and Eleanor suggested her sister Sancha for the opening. Richard was not a king, but he was the king's brother and the wealthiest man in England. He had an heir, but he could use a spare. On the 23rd of November, 1243, Queen Eleanor got her wish. Her 23-year-old sister Sancha married the 34-year-old Richard, Earl of Cornwall, a wealthy widower prince. Two of Margaret's sisters were now in England together with their powerful husbands, a king and a prince respectively. The following year, 23-year-old Queen Margaret was pregnant for the third time. Her third baby, and this time it was a boy, an heir to the throne of France, Prince Louis, Dauphin of France, named after his grandfather, Louis the Lion. And the very next year, another boy and spare, Prince Philippa, named after his father. All of Margaret's children were being named after her royal husband's family, but that was expected. And Queen Margaret got to business. If Eleanor and Sancha could have sister time in England, why not try and get her youngest sister with her in France? And her little sister Beatrice would be an easy sell. Their father had died the year before, and he had declared in his will that all of his lands were going to his youngest, still unmarried daughter. His other daughters were already set with powerful husbands. And Queen Margaret's brother-in-law needed a wife. It isn't lost on me that Blanche picked out Margaret in part for the chance at her father's lands, and now that Margaret's sister had those lands, she was interested in marrying off her younger son to the other young heiress. But I'm happy for Margaret. All of her sisters were moving to England, but Beatrice was staying in France. They were going to have French sister time. On the 31st of January, 1246, 16-year-old Countess Beatrice married 19 or 20-year-old Prince Charles, Count of Anjou and Maine, and now, thanks to his teenage wife, Provence. So there we have it. 2 Provence sisters at French court married to 2 brothers, and 2 Provence sisters at English court married to 2 brothers. Queen Margaret accompanied her husband on the 7th Crusade. The king's brother and the queen's sister also joined them. It was a couple's crusade trip. Not my vibe, but it was probably more fun than going without your sister. Over the next decade, the sisters attempted to encourage peace with their husbands, and a lot of babies. Queen Margaret had given birth to Isabella in 41, Louis in 44, Philippa in 45. In 1248, she had another baby, Prince Jean, but he died shortly after birth. Prince Jean Tristan was born in 50, Prince Peter was born in 51, Princess Blanche was born in 53, Princess Margaret was born in 54, and Prince Robert was born in 56. Margaret was spending most of her adult life pregnant. In 1257, Queen Margaret, newly postpartum with her baby Robert, probably heard that her sister Sancha's husband had been elected King of Germany. The 7 German princes had voted, and they had chosen Richard as their new king. Lady Sancha, turned Princess Sancha, was now Queen Sancha of Germany. 3 queens and 1 very wealthy princess. The Provence sisters were doing quite well. In 1259, big news. The kings of France and England were agreeing to a peace at the Treaty of Paris, and all 4 Provence sisters were in attendance, along with their mother. Time out. Ever seen Hamilton? If not, you should. In my head, the 4 Provence sisters are a lot like the Schuyler sisters, except without all the love triangle drama. So the sister alliance was working. It was an uneasy peace, and it led to more problems down the road, but the Provence sisters were working mostly as intended. The treaty was signed on December 4th, and just after Christmas, Queen Margaret's oldest son, Prince Louis, Dauphin of France, got ill and died at the age of almost 16. And not long after that, Queen Margaret had her last baby, Princess Agnes. The surviving royal children were 19-year-old Princess Isabella, who by now was already Queen of Navarre, 15-year-old Prince Philippa, the new Dauphin of France, 7-year-old Prince John Tristan, 9-year-old Prince Peter, 7-year-old Princess Blanche, 6-year-old Princess Margaret, 4-year-old Prince Robert, and baby Princess Agnes. The French royal nursery was completed after 2 decades of childbearing and surviving. You go, girl. That is no small feat. It was around this time that word may have arrived from England that her sister Sancha had fallen ill and died. 4 Provence sisters became 3. At some point, Queen Margaret got her teenage son, Philippa, to swear a vow to her that at no matter what age he became king, he would remain under her tutelage until he was 30. Margaret's husband, King Louis, was like, absolutely not. I know my mom did it for me, but you, my wife, are not my mother. And he went to the Pope to get his son officially released from this vow he had made to his mother. Louis wouldn't trust his wife ever to fill the role that his mother had for him. In 1265, the Pope did the French royal family another solid. The Pope made the King of France's younger brother the King of Sicily, meaning that Margaret's younger sister Beatrice was not only very wealthy, she was also the Queen of Sicily. Now all 4 Provence sisters had been queens of France, England, Germany, and Sicily. Unfortunately, Beatrice was only queen for just over a year. We don't know what she died of, but it's suspected that it was complications from a pregnancy, and that tracks. It's spot on for that time and place in history. Margaret's husband and 2 oldest sons were then going on crusade again. Unfortunately, as happens so often, dysentery spread throughout the camp. Prince John Tristan died of dysentery at the age of just 20, and 22 days later, his father, King Louis the Pious, also died of dysentery. Prince Philippa survived, and he was the new king of France. The king is dead. Long live the king. King Philip III was king at the age of 25. Margaret was now the queen mother. Queen Margaret decided to return to Provence for her retirement era, where she stayed in close contact with her sister, Eleanor, Queen of England. When Margaret's daughter Isabella also lost her husband, she joined her mother in Provence. But Isabella was only there for just 2 months. Princess Isabella died not long after arriving in Provence. Margaret's daughter, also named Margaret, also died around this time at the age of just 16 or 17 from complications from childbirth. Margaret was outliving a lot of her children. In 1271, when Margaret was about 50, her still surviving children were 26-year-old King Philip, 20-year-old Prince Peter, 18-year-old Princess Blanche, 15-year-old Prince Robert, and 11-year-old Princess Agnes. Margaret had just 5 surviving children. Margaret spent her retirement working on her piety. In 1284, Margaret's son Peter died at the age of 33. He had been attacked and killed by Aragonese mercenaries. The very next year, Margaret lost another son. King Philip died at the age of just 40. He passed of dysentery, just like his father and brother had. The king is dead. Long live the king. The new king was his son, Margaret's grandson, 17-year-old King Philip IV, known as Philip the Fair because he was just so pretty. We've talked about him before. Does anyone remember my very first episode on Isabella of France? This king was her father, meaning this episode is about Margaret, Isabella of France's great-grandmother. But little Princess Isabella wouldn't be born for another 10 years. In 1291, Margaret's last surviving sister Eleanor, the Queen of England, died at the age of 67 or 68. Sometime in 1295, Margaret's grandson, King Philip the Fair, had his only daughter, Princess Isabella of France, of Season 1, Episode 1 fame. If you want to, you can go listen to that episode and learn all about how Margaret's great-granddaughter married the King of England and then deposed him. That same year Isabella was born, her great-grandmother, Margaret, died in December at the age of 74. She died at the nunnery she had founded. Margaret was survived by her daughter, Princess Blanche, and her son, Prince Robert, and her daughter, Princess Agnes, along with many grandchildren and great-grandchildren. And that is where I'll leave it for now. What did you think of Margaret of Provence? Her life sounded so hard. She was the queen, but spent a majority of her life having babies and losing most of them. I like to think her retirement era was her most peaceful part of her life, and she just lived it up at her nunnery. You can share your thoughts with me at longlivethequeenpodcast@gmail.com or on Facebook or Instagram at longlivethequeenpodcast. Shout out to all my guests from last year. You guys are the best. Long live to all the queens out there, and until next time, bye.
You'll be remembered.
Thanks for listening.